the data part of this, right? So let me just make sure I got the questions right in my head. The first thing you want to do is you want to learn how to work with core data and how to set it up quickly, like if you have a JSON or something, how to quickly kind of create a same thing on core data. And then the second thing you had mentioned was like looking at GitHub. Or how to work with Git. Do you mean Git? There's Git and GitHub, which is a website. Right? Sometimes they do show you how. So the question, let me just restate the question. So the question is that on GitHub, like a lot of times we'll want to integrate a third-party library, and you're not finding very clear instructions on how to do that. Is that correct? Okay, so that's correct. So I have an example of that where I've actually already integrated this IB Animatable project, and I just basically pulled that down from GitHub. So if we slide over, I'm going to walk through it for a real quick second. As you can see, as soon as I start typing GitHub, my recent GitHub activity shows up, and there's IB Animatable. So let's click on that, and I'll show you how I did the integration. So I'll just walk you through it. So the first thing I did was I went and I found this software library that I want to use, and then I went to the how to install section, and I usually like to do a manual install. So basically it's saying here, copy and paste the IB Animatable folder in your Xcode project. So what I did first was before I could paste it into my project, I needed to have it installed locally on my side. So I downloaded it, and the way I like to download it is I just copy this link here. I make sure I'm using HTTPS. I copy the link, right? And you can do that just by clicking this button. So I click that button, and then I go over to let me see. Yeah, let me clear out a space here and go to where we have this project. I think it's in my working file, and I think it's XKCD, whatever, something like that. And what I do is I store my libraries into a separate folder, external libraries that I use into a folder. In this case, I call it the folder libs for libraries. And the way that I installed this is I just write git, and then oh, sorry, I just do a git clone. That's what I do. And then I paste in this link, and I hit enter. And if that directory does not exist, it will create the IB Animatable directory. Okay, so that's exactly what I do to get this project in my file directory. After I have it in my file directory, what I normally do is I go into the folder itself, and I check the git status. I'm weird. I usually like to disconnect the git status. I usually like to disconnect the project from where I got it, because I want it to be stable. I don't want it to keep updating. But Right. That's me. For, and the way that I would do that is I would just do something like rm dash rf. This is a Mac thing, and I just say dot get, and it would remove the entire Git folder, just like that. So just like that, rm dash rf space dot get. Well, one thing that's really kind of cool, instead of trying to remember what RF stands for, I think it means recursive folders or something like that. But instead of, like, R means one thing and F means something else. But instead of trying to remember that, what I try to do is remember how to find that information. I just try to remember that everything is manual. So MAN-RM, and that once I get there, it breaks down and says F, tries to and it explains it for me, so I don't have to think about it. And then there's one for R too, and it's saying R is the same thing as a capital R, and that means right here, take the hierarchy. So basically trying to remove the whole folder. And then to get out of manual, you got to say Q at here, and then you get back to your terminal prompt. So that's a short how-to on how I get this folder. Then after I get the folder, I run this command. I just say open and a space dot, and I do that because what that does is it goes to Finder. It lets me go to Finder, and it opens this folder. So now I can open that folder in Finder, that IB animatable folder. It opens up a Finder window for me. Close that, so it's like focused. You see how that's Finder, that's IB animatable, and you see how it's in the working folder under XCD, under libs, under IB animatable. Yeah, so that's the exact place where I was at over here. That's what the open command does with the space. Open space and period will open up a folder, the folder that you're currently inside of. If I look at the folder where I'm currently inside, it corresponds to working XKCD, libs, and ANIV. So anyway, that's how that works. So then once I have that open, then I can follow the simple instructions they told me to do on the website. So all those things I just kind of learned because I had to, I've been using this Mac, and I've been using these kind of systems for a long time. So what they're saying is copy and paste the IB animatable folder in your Xcode project, and so what that means is you could just take this whole folder here and drag this and copy and paste it into your project on the project side. I did something a little bit different. There's two ways. There's more than one way to do it. That's a common phrase. So instead of copying my whole project in, which I didn't do, instead of copying the whole folder in, I did something a little different. And this works just as well. You could do what they told you to do, and you'll get the same result, right? Or you could just, for me, I didn't want to bring in all these test files. I didn't want to bring in all of these supporting files. I just wanted to bring in this project. So that's what I did. I just brought the project in by dragging and doing the same copy paste, or I just dragged that file right over here. So then once I dragged it in, it has to be underneath your project, okay, because this works just like a pod. It'll associate. Now this is like accessible through my project, my XKCD project. Now this project file I dragged in is now accessible underneath it. And then in order to really make it 100% accessible, you got to do one more thing. And this is the one more thing. Otherwise, it won't work. The one more thing is you have to say, and you have a choice here. You could either make it a linked binary, a link framework, right? Which it's funny, I've done both. Or you could do an embedded binary. I usually do an embedded binary. So not quite sure why I have it as both this time, but I'll fix it later. And then when you're trying to import it, after you drag that in, you basic after you drag this IB animatable in, you basically go over here and you sorry, I'm going to step back for a second. You basically go over to where the embedded frameworks are and you hit the plus button, and then from that you'll be able to see the IB animatable project will appear, and you'll be able to select the framework for it. Like, because it's already inside mine, it's not going to let me select it again, but that's how it works. Okay? All right, so I don't want to, that, hopefully that's enough. And that's how, yeah, okay, cool, great. So with that being said, I'm just going to jump from the you know, I'm going to consider that question closed, and you know, you can always like re-look at the video later. So now, in terms of the model, what I did here is I normally create like a, I do something different here. I normally create like a helper library that will be where I store all of my code related to managing data. And the reason so I always like to have one central place that deals with data, right? No matter what. And so what I did was I went ahead and I found, I went to the website and I picked up a JSON file that just to get the structure of the JSON of the data, so I could see, okay, JSON is just a key and a set of keys and values. So in this case, it's an object that has a key of month and a value of 2, and so on, keys and values. So those keys and values, the way I map them is I went into my model file, my core data model file. It's usually going to be your project name dot this XC data model. And then basically what I did was I just created, I said, well, what does this represent to me? It's a comic book information item. So I just call it comic info item. You could call it whatever you want. You know, it's up to you. And then I decided to see, well, all the information that we get in this, according to that file that we were just looking at, all the information that we're getting there is coming from JSON. So it's all going to be like strings, and you know, it's going to be JSON data format. So I had to make decisions about, okay, how do I want everything to be a string, or you know, do I want it to be, you know, numbers in some cases, right? And so I made those decisions based on, like, the month is 2. I just like, okay, let the month be 2, whatever. Let the month be an integer. And because we're using a 64-bit, even though this doesn't have to be, it could also just be integer 16, I guess. But because we're using, because Swift runs on 32-bit and 64-bit devices, I usually like to use this integer 64 to represent a number, even though it's a bigger, you know, it takes more memory than, say, integer 16. There's a reason. But, you know, I didn't actually, this is like a personal choice. You know, if you know you're not going to be using really big numbers, you could just go with integer 16. It's just fine. Anyway, so I just started setting up all the different kind of things these are the same titles, the same keys rather, that are in the JSON. They're just pulled out right here. And yeah, everything that I went through the JSON and I just pulled out those strings and put them into this, like there's an image retina here. And so I created, you know, an image retina here. And I noticed that image retina was a URL. So over here, when the data model, they call it, instead of a URL, they call it URI, but it's the same thing. To recap what you're saying, I basically just as just as a recap of what you just restated and understood, I recreated this entity that represents comic info, and I called this comic info item. And then for each key in the